For a third straight season, the SEC is without a representative to the national championship game. Just how big of a crisis is it? And who is best poised to get the SEC back into the title mix next season? We'll discuss on this edition of SEC Football Unfiltered, our podcast from the USA Today Network. I'm Blake Toppmeyer alongside John Adams. John, it's dark days for SEC football. If someone would have told you a few years back that the SEC would go 3 years in a row, not only without having a national champion, but without having a team play for the championship, do you think you would have believed it, or how would you have tried to explain that on the front end?
No, I would explain that as just simply a backlash to the SEC's dominance and how people were hating on the SEC, and they just couldn't handle all of its success. And I would have said, well, get used to it if you haven't already. And now I'm talking a little differently. But this is not a surprise to us. We cast it this way in preseason when we talked about the SEC and Big Ten. It looked as though the Big Ten was stronger at the top, just as it has been the past 2 years. And we thought the same thing about this season, that the SEC may be stronger in the middle, stronger toward the bottom, but not at the top. And now we're not even sure if it's stronger anywhere than the Big Ten.
Good point. One thing I wondered, John, as I covered Indiana just body slamming Oregon in the semifinals, I thought, and maybe this was like being a victim of the moment, but I thought, is the Big Ten better than the SEC, or is Indiana this season just better than everybody? Because, we saw Indiana put Alabama in a grave in the Rose Bowl, and we thought, oh my gosh, Alabama, well, what was the committee thinking putting them in, or do they actually stink? And then a week later, Indiana does the same exact thing to Oregon. And in some ways, the beatdown of Oregon was even more appalling than what they did to Alabama. It was over in a blink against Oregon. So now, as we do, we kind of reassess things and, recalibrate our opinions. And I'm just wondering, maybe it's not as much, Big Ten superiority on the SEC. Maybe just Indiana has kind of almost hiding in plain sight become this super team akin to 2019 LSU or 2001 Miami. Remember that team filled with future NFL talent? Maybe that's the simplest explanation here is that flying a little bit below the radar, even though they were number one in the country, is Indiana is a super squad and they're laying waste to everybody. Doesn't matter what the conference logo on your jersey says.
I thought it was, and you were there, but I just thought watching it on TV and seeing the stadium in Atlanta, the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, just all red. I mean, you would have thought Alabama in full dynasty mode was playing, or maybe even Nebraska from the 1990s, just a sea of red. They're there to just annihilate whatever poor team might happen to be in their path on the way to a national championship. But no, it was Indiana. And that's what's so odd about this to me and so striking. And I think people are just doing double takes. They are finally accepting the reality that Miami has that Indiana, there I go. See, I still didn't want to give it credit, that Indiana has a great team. They're finally accepting that. And this is kind of like a team that would emerge from an established powerhouse in years gone by, not a Johnny-come-lately, as is the case with the Hoosiers. But it's such a complete team. And the Oregon game was much more stunning to me than the Alabama game, because I was pretty aware of Alabama's limitations, and you are too. But Oregon, I thought, was a pretty complete team. And could handle almost anything, and it would be a competitive game. I watched it take apart Texas Tech's offense, beat Texas Tech 23-0. I thought, well, this will be a really good semifinal game. And as you said, it was over in a blink, and there was never any doubt Indiana was that dominant. If it's able to win one more game, if it can beat Miami, and the odds makers say it will, then Indiana, I think, will be kind of regarded like just as the teams you mentioned, 2019 LSU, 2020 Alabama, and those 21-22 Georgia teams that won back to back. Those teams, there wasn't a lot of doubt about those teams. Everybody agreed, yeah, they're the best thing going. But the 2019 LSU team, a lot of people thought that was one of the greatest teams of all time in college football. And you kind of have to look at Indiana through the same lens now.
Mm-hmm. Indiana would be the first, if they could finish this off, they'd be the first 16-0 team in college football history. That LSU team went 15-0 in 2019. Of course, you couldn't go 16-0 at that time because the playoff was smaller. And so there will be a great debate if Indiana wins. Is this the best team of all time? I'm up for those debates. I think sometimes people get maybe a little bit too entrenched in their camp there. Those are unprovable arguments, right? I mean, we can sit here and debate, 2001 Miami or 2005 Texas or 2019 LSU, 2020 Alabama. There's no way to prove your argument, but I'm up for the debate. But what is undebatable would be that Indiana would be the first team to go 16-0, and so they would have that beyond dispute there. But I'm wondering, John, we both closely observed that 2019 LSU team and remember it well. What do you think the betting spread would be if it was 2019 LSU with Joe Burrow and all that talent on that squad against this Indiana team in the national championship on Monday? What would the betting spread be?
I think LSU would be about a 4-point favorite.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I was thinking 2.5, but yeah, 4 points maybe. Somewhere in there, somewhere 2 to 4 points.
Yeah, but the teams are so different. LSU had superstars. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase are on their way to the NFL Hall of Fame. If Cincinnati or some NFL franchise can provide Joe Burrow with enough blocking up front, he could end up in the Hall of Fame. They had more star power on that team. Not really any weaknesses, but the defense wasn't as good as the offense. Certainly didn't have the star power. Had some big time players on it, but the offensive guys got so much publicity because they were so dominant. But with Indiana, I marvel at Indiana because if you're designing a plan to attack Indiana, you look for a weakness. Well, what is Indiana's weakness?
They don't have one. Yeah, they don't have one.
It doesn't have one. I mean, it doesn't make mistakes. It doesn't make foolish penalties. It's good on everything. In that game, I was thinking, it was deep into the game. It was all Indiana, and I was thinking, Oregon's getting ready to punt. Well, I was saying, well, I guess all that's left is for Indiana to return a punt for a touchdown. No, it didn't do that, but it blocked the punt. I mean, like right on cue. Okay, any more questions?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, two stats that just I'm amazed by. Indiana fumbled early in the year, maybe the first game, lost a fumble, hasn't lost one since. How's that even possible? And then the other one where Fernando Mendoza has thrown more touchdown passes than incompletions in the playoff. These are just such weird stats that you just can't comprehend really, but that's what this team has done, and that's what it is, and that's what Miami will have to deal with. You make mistakes against Indiana, boy, you're in huge trouble.
You're down 21-0 in a hurry, and that at least this one won't be at Mercedes-Benz Stadium because at the Benz, John, as you may know, they put that train horn on anytime somebody scores a touchdown. As I wrote my column, by the third quarter, my ears were ringing. That train horn was just blaring over and over and over after every Hoosiers score. It was like, the duck was strapped down to the railroad tracks and was getting run over by that locomotive. That was,
it was like it was the Amtrak from Atlanta to Bloomington, Indiana. It was just
Yeah, and they brought all the fans from Bloomington. That's for sure.
uh-huh.
There was nobody left in Indiana, judging by the stadium. But you mentioned Miami, John, and I thought I want to throw at you from there. I made this point on a radio show recently. Miami almost reminds me a little bit. I don't know if they're quite this good, but their makeup kind of reminds me of one of old school Nick Saban teams. You know, remember at the beginning of the dynasty, they were dominant at the line of scrimmage. I mean, for all the accolades we give to Indiana, you know, you look at the way Miami's constructed. Miami's pretty darn good on the offensive and defensive lines. They've got just a nasty defense. They've got some really good skill guys at wide receiver. Those Alabama teams, even in the early days of the dynasty, when it was, you know, sort of murder ball as they called it, they always had one or two really good wide receivers. Miami's got a great run game with Mark Fletcher, and then at quarterback they have sort of like an upgraded game manager, and maybe that doesn't sound fair to Carson Beck, but I don't really totally mean that as a slight, but he's not Fernando Mendoza, he's not a dual threat guy like a Trinidad Chambliss, but he's a higher level game manager, which kind of reminds me of some of those quarterbacks from the early days of the Saban era. What do you think about that comparison? To think of this Miami team as sort of an old school Bama squad.
Yeah, A.J. McCarron comes to mind for Alabama. A very accurate passer, good arm, not a big running threat. Ironically, of course, Carson Beck ran into the end zone, but for the winning touchdown. But that was there was nobody there to stop him. I think Carson Beck has not been perceived that way previously. He was considered a high first-round draft pick potentially at one time. I don't know that he's that anymore when he threw 12 interceptions in 6 games at Georgia last year. That kind of changed the narrative. But what I think of him as is sort of a deluxe game manager.
Oh, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
And I don't want him to step outside that role. I don't trust Carson Beck trying to be Trinidad Chambliss or trying to make something or Fernando Mendoza. I don't want the game to rest on his throw. I don't want him to try and thread the needle between two safeties. I don't want him to try and make that perfect pass on an out route. He concerns me mistake-wise, but he's been very under control, and he does have a good arm, and he seems to be playing with a lot of confidence. So I think that's about as good as you could hope for with him. And I'm not knocking him either. Sounds like we're knocking him, but I'm not. You can win championships with quarterbacks like this. You have to be more than a game manager.
A deluxe game manager.
Deluxe game
I like that. Yeah, in the middle of the season, Beck threw 4 picks in the loss to Louisville.
I know.
He threw 2 picks to SMU. But you look since then, John, they've played 7 games since that loss to SMU. He's only thrown 2 interceptions in 7 games. And that's where it started to turn for Miami. He stopped making those critical errors. And you can't have him killing you with mistakes, because that's one thing Indiana's not going to do. You mentioned it. They haven't fumbled since the season opener. They do not turn the ball over. They don't commit penalties. They don't commit stupid blunders. They're not going to beat themselves. So if you're playing them, you can't be turning the ball over 2, 3, 4 times, or you're not going to have a chance, because they're not going to do it on the other side.
I thought it was really telling that when Mendoza broke into the open field, made a nice run and kind of made a sort of a semi-swivel hip move, the ball spun out, and lo and behold, 20 yards downfield, here's an Indiana offensive lineman on cue, almost as though it were planned. Like, yeah, Mendoza will probably fumble. I'll be downfield and scoop it up, which he did. I thought that was one of the oddest things that happened in the game. That's not the kind of fumble an offensive lineman should be recovering. And there were no other Hoosiers around.
Yeah, we made that point in the press box when he fumbled. It was just like, well, of course there was an offensive lineman right there to recover because it's Indiana. They just don't lose fumbles. And I don't know, maybe there's an element of luck to this, but I also think that it probably goes to being a veteran, smart, well-coached team. A degree of luck, but also preparation on that front as well. Okay, John, let's get to how the SEC ends this streak and make sure 3 years does not get to 4 in not being represented in the national championship game. You look at the portal rankings, and SEC schools are doing pretty well there. In particular, Texas made a big splash a few days ago getting Cam Coleman, the 5-star wide receiver transfer from Auburn. He's been like a 5-star through and through. He was a 5-star coming out of high school. He's a 5-star portal ranking. Texas has had a pretty good haul here. Now, it's worth noting Texas has lost some talent too. They've had some good players slip out the side door, but they are fueling up here with Cam Coleman and others. They've got a couple big running backs coming in. Hollywood Smothers from NC State is one of the running backs, and then Malik Brown from Arizona State. These are 2 A-list running backs. They've got Cam Coleman, the wide receiver, to pair with Arch Manning. You know what they're bringing back at quarterback. Arch got better throughout the season. They've made some defensive upgrades. Are you buying in? I know Texas, we fell into the trap with Texas this year of, well, they were preseason number 1. We were all singing their praises, and they didn't live up to it. But maybe is next year perhaps the year with Texas, and finally the wait till next year comes to fruition next year after this loading up in the portal.
Better to have sung the praises of Texas last preseason than LSU, as I did so foolishly.
True.
Thinking it would be a national champion. Not quite, but it did get its coach fired. No, I think Texas, you look at what it's doing in the portal, it's getting some quantity, but it's also really getting quality. It's going with the high-end talent. It gets those 2 running backs, 2 all-ACC linebackers. It's filling needs and getting some star power, and Cam Coleman was a big get. You pair him with Arch Manning, a different Arch Manning we saw at the end of the season than at the beginning. So I think Texas will go into the offseason as the SEC's champion, as the team most likely to contend for a national title. And I thought it was really significant, Blake, was when here we had running back Hollywood Smothers from NC State commits to Alabama in dire need of running backs. A really nice acquisition on Alabama's part. And what happens? Texas looks around and says, well, maybe we could use him. Let's take him. And one call later, I guess, he's no longer committed to Alabama and he's signing with Texas. I thought that was pretty significant in a bad way for Alabama fans.
Mm-hmm. And then also in the SEC, John, LSU, it was a slow start in the portal for them, a little bit surprisingly so, since they hired this so-called portal king. And you had to wonder about that because when Lane Kiffin was hired, he told ESPN that he might evolve his roster building strategy because he was now at a school where it was easier to sign 4- and 5-star blue chippers out of high school, and said he was going to more supplement with the portal at LSU and build with the high school recruits. Well, maybe down the road, maybe he'll shift to that. I would caution against it because what Lane is best at is assembling portal talent. But here in the short term, he had to flip the roster, and the way to do that is with transfers. He got off to a slow start, but he's cooking now. This transfer class is looking pretty good. And as we record this on Monday, news breaking that Sam Leavitt is now committed to LSU to be Lane Kiffin's quarterback. Now, Sam Leavitt dealt with an injury this season, so he's on the mend, but 2 seasons ago, he took Arizona State to the playoff. I know you fell into that trap, John, of buying in too much to LSU's portal class last year, but different coach now, different quarterback now, Leavitt on the way. How much are you buying into Lane Kiffin and LSU in year 1, maybe being able to make a run at this thing?
I don't know about a run. I think it will be better. I still wonder about LSU's offensive line.
Mm, mhm.
I just, I mean, pretty much all the guys left, and I think Lane Kiffin was fine with that. It was not a solid offensive line. Garrett Nussmeier can vouch for that. So I just wonder if he still if it might still have the problem. Kiffin's teams, as you know, run the ball well.
Mhm.
His offense is geared to the run, and then he's got playmakers all over the place at wide receiver. He's apparently getting those playmakers. He's signed about 6 wide receivers. So you can bet 3 of them will be good. I think the odds favor LSU in that sense. But I just don't know how good the offensive line will be. And I don't know that he has the Kejuan Lacey like he did at Ole Miss to run the ball.
Those are great points, and even though Sam Leavitt is going to have the high ranking out of this portal class, like I don't know that he's going to be Trinidad Chambliss. Like sometimes these guys come out of nowhere and surprise you. Leavitt was fine this year, but it really was not, even before the injury, it was not shaping up to be a brilliant encore for him at Arizona State. He was better 2 years ago in 2024 than he was this past season. And now, as I mentioned, he had a foot injury that laid him up in November. He may not even be back for spring practice as he comes off that foot injury. And so, I think when Lane went to LSU, there was a thought of maybe Chambliss was going to get another season, which now seems very much in doubt with the NCAA throwing up roadblocks there. But Chambliss has said even if he gets that extra season, he's not going to LSU. He would come back to Ole Miss. And so, yeah, I would take Leavitt based on the options available at this point. But if I could have Chambliss or I could have Leavitt for another year, I'd rather have Chambliss. And like you said, I'd rather have Kejuan Lacey. And I agree with you. For all these upgrades LSU is making at some of the skill positions, and they're getting some guys on defense, I don't know if there's enough there on the offensive line to make me think that they can be the team to in the SEC streak of not being in the national championship game. I think they'll be better, as you said, but I think Texas, if we're looking at somebody who's been really swinging with a firm punch here in the portal, I think Texas is the team from the SEC that maybe has the pieces necessary to chase this thing and get there next year. Which, again, I know we're in danger of overhyping Texas, but Texas at the end of the season, let's face it, they were a different team. They beat Texas A&M on Thanksgiving week. I know it was a Michigan team embroiled in controversy, but they beat Michigan, and Arch Manning looked great. I don't care about the controversy at Michigan. I care more about how Arch Manning looked in that game. He played very, very well. He looked so much different than he did in week one. So I really think, John, with Texas, it might have just been that the hype came a year too soon, and that this coming season they are a legit contender.
Well, I think one of our strengths is we're not afraid to jump off a bandwagon or jump back on.
Yeah, we're back on.
We stay nimble, and I think you need to do that. I think Arch Manning, if you forget all the hype surrounding him, all the projections that he'll be the Heisman winner, he will be the first player drafted in 2026. Set all that aside and just watch his last few games or even the last half of the season, all his games. And this guy's coming back, you'd say, hey, that's a Heisman candidate. Dual threat guy, can run for 100 yards in a game, can score on a 50-yard touchdown run, and can throw the ball. So he's kind of what you want. And now he's got all that, all the hype. It will return, but I think it will be it won't matter so much. He's proved what he can do. So he will go into next season, I don't think feeling pressure. I think he'll feel confident. He knows what he's up against. He knows what he can do, knows what he can't do, knows his limitations. So I think he'll be very good. And getting Cam Coleman, having a go-to receiver of that magnitude, that's a great acquisition. And then Ryan Wingo, you'd like to see him step up, and that gives He's certainly got potential. So, and Texas has helped it. It loses running backs, but then he seemingly gets better running backs in the portal. So you look at this offensive group now on paper, this is a better offense than what Texas was about to field in 2025. On paper, this offense looks like it could be more prolific.
I agree. I agree. Would you say, if we're doing way too early front runners, who would you have as your SEC front runner? Is it Texas or is it somebody else?
Oh, it's clearly Texas. There's nobody else I would even give a second thought to. Georgia would probably be second on my list, simply because of Kirby Smart's track record. And I think he'll have an offense. His defense will be fairly solid and or better. And I think he's got the kind of offense that he likes coaching. It will be slanted heavily toward the run because he's got depth at running back now, a proven offensive line. I think he'll have most of those guys back that finish the season, and a quarterback who can also run in Gunnar Stockton. Needs some playmakers at wide receiver. They need to step forward. But, yeah, I look at Georgia, and when I think, okay, well, who's number 3? That's where I draw a blank.
John, a program that you cover closely that was in the playoff a year ago, Tennessee. When I look at, I feel like Tennessee is, we're forced to maybe question, has Tennessee hit its peak already under Josh Heupel? I mean, that 2022 season was incredible with Hendon Hooker and Jalen Hyatt and a lot of the leftovers from the Jeremy Pruitt era, but Heupel got them playing in a way that they never did for Jeremy Pruitt. And then, in 2024, with a more defensive-laden team, he got to the playoff. But Tennessee regressed this year and signed a pretty good high school recruiting class, and they're making more noise in the portal than what they have in previous years under Josh Heupel, but they're not splashing to the degree that like a Texas is. And I'm just wondering, like I said, this was a program that was in the playoff a couple years ago that was in the national championship hunt in 2022 under Josh Heupel, but it just doesn't feel like there's a ton of buzz around Tennessee right now. But I know you cover that program closely. Am I missing something here? Is Tennessee on the verge of getting back to the playoff next season, or they more feel like they're treading water here around 8-4, 9-3 terrain?
You sound very much like the Tennessee fans who email me do.
Maybe I'm emailing you under an alias, John.
Maybe several. You look at what Josh Heupel done. It's certainly an improvement over what was going on before him when Tennessee went those 13 seasons and was of little consequence in the national picture. Had a couple of 9-win seasons, but had losing seasons as often as not in that 13-year run. And then he upgrades the program immediately and significantly. But now it's kind of like the email I get, well, Josh Heupel's a good coach, but he's not an elite coach. I don't know how many elite coaches there are. I think a good coach with elite talent suddenly becomes an elite coach. But I don't see the level of talent going into next season that makes me think, well, Tennessee might win the whole thing. I just don't see that.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say, John, their portal class is better as we record this on Monday. Their portal class is better so far than it's been in past years under Heupel. But how much of that is attributable to the fact that Tennessee brought in Penn State's defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles? I mean, the best guys in this class, a lot of them are from Penn State. They followed Knowles to Tennessee, right? So, I mean, that's a one-year bump. You can't expect that every year. So it's nice for Tennessee that this is a better class than years before, but I don't know that that's necessarily a sign of changing times, that Heupel is getting better in the portal. It's a sign that a handful of Penn State guys, their coach was fired, and Tennessee got Jim Knowles, and they followed him to Tennessee, is what it says to me.
Yeah, I think it's it helps when you have a Jim Knowles has a great reputation. He earned first at Oklahoma State, really, and then coordinated a national championship defense at Ohio State in 24. Uh, didn't help James Franklin that much at Penn State this past season. But yeah, he's got a really good reputation. He's supposedly a really good tactician. That's great. And it helps when you have this kind of transition to have players on defense at every level, safety, linebacker, and D line, that know his system, know what he expects. So that familiarity that could spread to the rest of the roster quicker than it might have been without this Penn State influx. Uh, but I look at Tennessee's roster now. It still needs a quarterback. I think it will get one in form of Missouri and form of Penn State quarterback, Bo Pribula and Prabula. I'm sorry. I'm really confused on that name.
You just got to pick one and go with it.
Yeah,
John.
I know.
You can't go back and forth on your pronunciations.
I'll get it down right. I got Nico Yamaleava finally. So I just I like him. I like what he did at Missouri, but he's not what you think of as, you don't look at Bo Prabula and say, well, that guy will win a national championship before he's done. It's not, he wasn't an elite quarterback this year, but he was a good quarterback. So maybe that's all Heupel needs. But when I look overall at this roster, I don't know how much better it is than the 2024 roster. I don't look at it and think, oh boy, that's a huge upgrade there and there. I think in some positions you strengthen yourself, but overall, I don't know how much better the roster is.
Yeah, and I wonder, John, there was a rush from folks in our chair and also the Tennessee fan base to declare Tennessee the winner of the Nico Iamaleava trade. Obviously, that was an easy take to make when Nico really was not playing well at all in his first month at UCLA, and UCLA was terrible the first month of the season. But now, Nico coming back to UCLA for another season, will Tennessee, whether it's Bo Prabula or somebody else, will Tennessee have a better quarterback than Nico in 2026? I'm starting to wonder whether they will. I don't know if they had a better quarterback by the end of the season. This year, Nico got better once he got settled in there at UCLA. And if you think about what he would have been in 2026 at Tennessee, I don't know. I think it's much more difficult now for Tennessee to thump its chest and say they won that trade, losing 2 seasons of Nico to UCLA.
Well, it's not just about who's the best quarterback. It's about who's the best quarterback in Josh Heupel's system. I thought Joey Aguilar was an upgrade over Nico. His skill set fit what Heupel wanted to do a little more. Prabula may be the same case.
That's
when
fair.
I watched Nico at UCLA, even when he got off to a bad start and he was playing for a bad team, I saw things from him. I kind of thought he would be that player at Tennessee, where he's just kind of running around making plays, out there on the playground, just using natural ability. But he was such a good runner. That's just what I thought he would be at Tennessee, and we never saw that. I think he was coached not to run so much at Tennessee. I think it changed the way he ran, and I also think he had trouble in Heupel's system, which he didn't have a great touch on the deep ball.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of really triggers things in Heupel's offense. I also thought he didn't process information quickly enough. Maybe experience, more reps will help with that. But I just saw a guy at UCLA kind of making plays, and I think he could have made more plays if he'd stayed at Tennessee, but I don't know that he would be better than what Aguilar was. I don't think he would have been, not in that system, not in Heupel's system. And I think Bo Prabula could fit that system. I don't know how good of a passer he is on the deep ball, though.
Missouri was not very prolific on deep strikes this year, but I think you raise a fair point. Like, I don't know. I don't know that Tennessee doesn't need Nico back. They just need to land a good quarterback here. That's what they need. It's not that they need Nico back. They just need to get a good quarterback into Heupel's system to make that thing go. One other thing I want to touch on quickly here, John, before we make our final pick of the season. Um, I wrote a column about this, but there's this idea now that Alabama a couple years ago should have hired a Nick Saban disciple to replace him. Pat McAfee of ESPN really was pushing that narrative, and Saban himself said, like, well, I don't know who was out there that wanted the job. That was one of my former assistants that you could have got. And some people say, like, well, what about Curt Cignetti? As I wrote in my column, John, that was never an idea for anyone surrounding Alabama, period. Curt Cignetti was coming from James Madison. He'd just been hired by Indiana 6 weeks previously when Nick Saban retired. I don't remember a single soul on this earth saying that Alabama should go get Curt Cignetti. In fact, if they'd hired a guy who'd been Indiana's coach for 6 weeks, some of the Alabama fans might have made Greg Byrne walk the plank, the Alabama athletic director. So I think the idea that Alabama should have hired Cignetti, that's easy to say in hindsight, but at the time it would have been seen as absurd. But what do you think about the general idea that Alabama screwed up by not hiring a Saban disciple? I mean, I think Lane Kiffin would have said yes. Other than that, I don't know what former Alabama or former Saban assistant wanted the job.
I don't think coaching is Alabama's biggest problem. There's nothing wrong with Kalen DeBoer's track record. You look at him on paper when Alabama hired him. Maybe I'm not as high on him now as I was when he was hired, but yeah, he's won wherever he's been. He had a really good resume, and he turned Washington into a playoff team right away, played for a national championship. So I don't think Alabama's problem is coaching. I think its problem is money. Can it compete with the big dogs and with the money, with the NIL program? I question whether it can. To that point, it's got as I mentioned earlier, it's got a commitment from running back Hollywood Smothers and had a great need for a running back. But then Texas, a few days later, said, no, we could use Hollywood Smothers. Let's take him. And off he goes. That to me is alarming. For if you're an Alabama fan, that should be alarming. That I don't think he had any great allegiance to any program. He's just looking for the best deal, and he got that at Texas. I think that's the problem Alabama has to address.
And Alabama, they're still signing good classes, but good high school classes, but their transfer halls are just pretty small in number. They don't take bad players, but they don't take very many players either in their transfer hall. And as we're seeing, it's like that's where a lot of the big dollars go, are for those transfers. Yeah, it takes money to be competitive in high school recruiting too, but the biggest dollars, it sure seems like, go to the proven talent that hop in the portal. That's where having a billionaire at your disposal can really help you. And it is striking to me, for whatever reason, whether it's money or something else, it's striking to me that Alabama is being so quiet in the transfer terrain. I know they signed a really good high school class, but when you look at the teams that thrived in this college football playoff, I mean, two of the semifinalists, Indiana and Ole Miss, were the two most transfer-leaning teams in the playoff field, and they make it to the semifinals. Indiana's now playing for a national championship game. Miami has a lot of high-impact transfers on its roster as well. If you're still doing it the old way of signing the blue chippers and developing, I think you're playing the wrong game now. The rules of engagement have changed, and it's not like these classes you're getting, it's not to the degree that Alabama was maybe signing 10 years ago, or Georgia used to be signing with Kirby Smart. There's still really good high school classes, but they're maybe not quite the same, and you're not supplementing with the transfer talent that everybody else is. I think that's a tough road to hoe. You've got to be active in the transfer game, and if what Alabama needs is more money, then then I guess they better pass the hat again.
Well, you look at Ohio State. Ohio State doesn't go wild in the transfer portal, but when it goes into the portal, it gets the very, very highest level player out there. It got one from Alabama and Caleb Downs, a safety, after Nick Saban retired. It got Kansas State's Will Howard, who engineered their their drive to the national championship in 2024. Quinshon Judkins, one of the top running backs in the SEC at Ole Miss. It got those guys. If you can recruit elite high school players and keep them in your system, you can do well. But you also have to be able to get, if you can, it helps when you can go out and get some of the best players in the country. And see, Alabama hasn't done that.
Which I think is why we both like Texas. They're still signing top 10 high school classes, but now in this portal cycle, they've added some real A-list transfer talent. All right, John, let's make our national championship pick. Would you look at this? It's come to this, and you have a 1-game lead on me, John. You are 0-2 in the semifinals. Oh, so close with Ole Miss. Not close with your pick of Oregon. I went 1-1 in the semifinals, so I've closed the gap ever so slightly. And now here you are, 44-41 for the season. I am 43-42. We're both above 500. You got a 1-game lead on me. I don't know. My goal is probably just to stay above 500. Whether I catch you or not, who cares? I just want a year where I'm above 500. So why don't you pick first, and we'll see if I mimic you and admit defeat, or go the other way and try to force the tie. The betting spread, by the way, Indiana is an 8.5-point favorite in the championship game.
Yeah, I think Indiana will win the game. How could it not? How could you not think that after watching them go through these playoffs, after watching it beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game? But at least that Big Ten championship game was close, 13-10 game. Ohio State did a nice job defensively. So that to me is maybe too many points. I think all Miami's hearing is how great Indiana is. And I think you're going to see a Hurricane team that is really revved up and ready to play, and playing with a real mission sense. I just think that helps it. It's not as good as Indiana. It makes more mistakes in Indiana, but it does have a lot of talent. And you mentioned this earlier, and I think this is really significant. It's good in the lines, offensive and defensive lines. So I don't think you're going to see as big a gap maybe in the defense when Indiana hands it off to one of those two running backs. I think I think, and we even saw this against Oregon. Go back to that Oregon game against Indiana. The high point of the game for the Ducks came after that quick 6 by Indiana on the interception return for a touchdown on the very first play. Oregon gets the ball back and drives downfield for a touchdown. Game on. Actually, the route was soon on. But watching that drive, and even watching drives after that, I thought Oregon moved the defensive front of Indiana at times well enough to gain yards, but it have a turnover and it shoot itself in the foot, and things didn't work out. I think Miami might be able to run the ball on Indiana. That's my whole case for saying that Indiana won't cover the spread.
Okay. I'm not changing my pick, John. I was actually going to give the points and take Indiana, but this makes it more interesting now to do that you've taken Miami. I think you're making the more logical pick, and I'm falling into that trap of, well, I was there in person to watch Indiana just completely depants Oregon and embarrass them. And I also can't forget what I saw whenever Indiana played Alabama. And so I think I'm probably being sucked in here, but I'm getting sucked in because I'm taking Indiana and laying the points. So there we have it. If I get it, we'll have a tie and we'll both be 500. And I guess that's cause for celebration.
Based on our track record, very much so.
Very much so. Well, thanks all for listening. John and I aren't going anywhere in the off season. We'll be with you each and every week throughout the off season, but we've had a blast with you throughout the regular season, the postseason, all the hirings and firings. Such fun, unless you were one of the coaches getting fired. But even they got a buyout check. Everybody wins. Thanks for listening to this edition of SEC Football Unfiltered. Enjoy the national championship.